Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in this week. Before I present the guest, I would just like to ask, as always, please follow on Spotify, on Apple, and review as well. I think that's only on Apple. Really appreciate it. It really helps the podcast grow. And if you could do that, I would really appreciate it. So, on to the guest for the week. I have Danielle Vasilo. Daniel used to work for Amazon and decided at some point that it was just not for him anymore. Although he was making a great salary, he just decided that this is too time consuming. I don't love what I'm doing and I want to switch it up. So he made the bold move a couple of years ago, quit his job with no real plan in mind, and just decided to see what will happen. What happens next is pretty amazing. Daniel, well, you know what? I will let Daniel explain exactly what happened next. So you can just tune into the episode. But we definitely talk about taking risks, about what he explains is a portfolio of small bets, why you don't have to be a air quotes master at something in order to sell an info product, how to drive traffic, and the importance of transparency when building an audience. This was fascinating for me. I'm in a very similar space, similar to Daniel, and some of the insights he had, I will definitely kind of brew and ruminate on and see how I can implement them into everything that I do. So I think you guys are going to love it. If you're a creator, if you're someone of an entrepreneur, a bunch of really, really great tips for you here. So without further ado, let me introduce this week's guest, Danielle Vasilo. Enjoy the podcast, everyone.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Danielle Vasilo, how you doing, my friend? Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Larry. How are you? I'm doing great.
Yeah, I'm great. I'm enjoying the sun today because it's been raining for the past couple of days. So finally, there's a bit of sun. I'm happy about that. And yeah, I'm happy to have you on because I've been following you for a long time, and I have a lot of questions for you. So I'm really pleased that you made some time and came on the podcast today.
Awesome. Happy to share my perspective on anything.
Awesome, man. All right, so let's kind of let's go back and then build up. I want to learn more about you. Where were you born?
So I was born in a very small country called Malta in Europe, just a tiny island south of Italy, one of the smallest countries in the world, actually. I grew up there. I lived there until I was about 25, 26. Then I moved to Ireland for work. I got hired by Amazon, actually. Okay. And then Amazon sort of invited me to move to Seattle. And this is where I've been living for the past almost 10 years now.
So you moved Malta, Ireland. How long were you in Ireland for?
A couple of years, yeah. Early 2010 to 2012, yes.
And then from Ireland to Seattle.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How was that move? Was that the first time in the US when you moved over, or you've been before?
Yeah, yes. No, it was the first time I've even visited, actually. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I love the US now. I mean, it's, I've set up my roots here, I have a family, bought a house. It's where I feel like I belong. So very happy that Jeff Bezos gave me this opportunity.
Thank you, Jeff. How was did you have a bit of a culture shock initially? Like, how was it when you moved?
I don't, not initially. That obviously now sort of I see lots of cultural differences, but initially when I moved, especially since both me and my wife were still, we didn't have any kids. We were just focused on work. Mm-hmm. The work side didn't really change much. We were both working for an American company. My wife was working for Microsoft, incidentally, a Seattle-based sort of company as well. And the move was quite good. I mean, now sort of I see lots of differences between sort of the Southern European way of life and approach to work and life versus the American, at least West Coast or the general coastal area culture. Happy to talk more about those, but
Sure.
the initial part was quite gradual.
It's so funny you mentioned that. I have the same thing. I moved over from a Mediterranean country 8 years ago, Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and I initially I same thing. I didn't see the difference. I'm like, oh yeah, it's the same. And then 3, 4, 5, 6 years in, you start seeing a lot of differences. A lot of differences. It wasn't visible in the beginning, but I can definitely see it now. And I appreciate both things. It's not like one is good, one is bad. It's just very different.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And I think I used to get those semi-shocks when I used to visit back. I used to go back about once a year, and I used to meet with my friends and family. And then that's where I used to see the striking difference. Basically, I used to sort of notice, like these people for example, right, are working a lot less than I am, right? They sort of don't have a lot of professional burdens and obligations, but they're still as happy or as sort of living fulfilled lives as I am, or they're earning, just a fraction of I'm doing, but again, like they don't seem to be missing anything. Which sort of used to make me think a lot about the cost of, for example, living in the rat race and sort of trying to climb the career ladder and things like that. Which, long story short, sort of made me revisit my sort of my life and
So you kind of got to that point for me already. Like that was kind of going to be my next question. So maybe we'll set it, set the story for people a little bit. You worked for Amazon for a few years, making good salary by any measure in any country. And then you got to a point where that's it. You just decided to quit. Maybe you can tell the story for people.
No, I mean, so I joined Amazon initially as, I was always, I think, sort of reluctant to join a big corporation. I always had I always imagined myself not fitting well in lots of structure and things like that. Nevertheless, I remember I was still in Malta and I was feeling like I was missing out on the learning side, that I was reading blogs from other people online at the time and sort of feeling that I would never learn, part of technology or part of software development, which was my profession, right? Unless I were to sort of go into the big leagues. So that's how it started. And initially, that's what I was getting. Right? The first couple of years, I was absorbing a lot, learning a lot. It was quite fun, new thing, a new adventure. But then as that learning and that part diminished, what was happening on the other side, I was getting sort of rewarded by other means. I got promoted twice very quickly. I got the offer to move to the US, which I appreciated a lot. My compensation was increasing, almost doubling after a couple of years, which was beyond my expectations. So I think there was a part in my first half of my term there that I think I fell into the trap of believing that there's no other alternative for me. I mean, I was thinking mostly in financial terms. That there was, even starting my own business or going somewhere else, it just didn't make sense in my head, because just the time I would need to even recover to where I'm at yet, just the area under the graph where I would lose would take probably years to fill up, to fill up. So for a while I felt like, this is it. This is what I'm going to be doing, right? Because in terms of expected value, in terms of financial expectation, probability times payoff. This was the best route. Until again, and I think it started, as I was saying before, going back for vacation, taking those yearly breaks and sort of seeing firsthand through my own eyes a completely different way of life, which I had been living through, but I had almost forgotten. Where it was probably the first trigger point. And then I think I went back and I started looking around me, right? And I started noticing people that were higher up than me, in terms of level and status and compensation. And to be honest, and to be quite blunt, I didn't envy any of them, envy in a good way. I didn't feel like I wanted to be in their shoes at all, right? I was seeing people that were, highly successful by all measures, but they were leaving their house 6 a.m. before their kids wake up. They stay there until 7, 8. They return home where their kids are about to sleep. In the weekends, they sort of have lots of things to do. They're always stressed out. And, I mean, you start wondering, like, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So I think basically I realized that I would be fooling myself if I believed that yet another bonus or yet another promotion would ultimately change things, right? So, basically one day I realized, it was pretty much almost overnight, that my sort of chapter in big tech is over, that I just need to take the plunge and leave. I wasn't even thinking of, I just want to make a small change. Like I realized what I knew 10 years before, that, working in a highly structured environment is not very compatible with me.
Yeah.
It's just, it took me a while to exit from the trap of people dangling sort of bags of money. Bags of money.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yes. So yes, that's how, and it still took me another couple of years since sort of I had that, I realized that I wanted to change until I actually changed. Part of it was I wanted to find the right time. I was in the middle of a new project, and sort of back then I was thinking that I needed to plan a little bit, even though now in hindsight, I don't think sort of any type of planning really helps in those situations. If you can afford it, I think it's better to just take the plunge and then figure it out.
So you didn't have like a concrete plan. You weren't like, you know what, I'm leaving. I'm going to do ABC. I'm going to set up interviews. I'm going to start a startup. You were just like, you know what, this isn't for me. I have faith that I'm going to do something good, and I'm just going to take the plunge.
Yeah, I think the only concrete plan I had was I didn't want to go back. Right? Yeah. Actually, many people who leave, and this is since I left, I met many people who took a similar took a similar approach, and I think I noticed two types of approaches. Like people who leave, but with the belief that they have a fallback to go back, and it's always even my case. I could go back either to Amazon or some other place if I wanted to. And I think those people who do that almost always end up going back, right? Because I think you take a very different risk sort of approach, right? Because I left with almost like certainty. I mean, you can never say never, but almost with the full conviction that I absolutely didn't want to go back, which I think really helped me a lot in sort of focusing a lot on the downside. Like I tweeted recently that, which resonated with a few people, that I think when you take this approach, you're not really trying to maximize your profits or your income or whatever. You're just trying to maximize the odds that you don't have this lifestyle taken away from you now, right? It's that you don't have to go back to a full-time job.
Yeah.
And I think sort of this helped me. Initially, it was still hard, like because, you're dealing with ambiguity and lots of uncertainty. And there was quite a bit of a stressful period, the first 6 months, I would say, until things started to click. But sort of this attitude really helped me in sort of not just saying, it looks like this is not working out, I'm just going to go apply to work at Google or Microsoft or whatever, right? Which is many of sort of ex-colleagues that I know ended up doing if they started with sort of this fallback. So yes, to answer your question, no, nothing really concrete. I had some vague ideas. Initially, I thought that I'm just going to build a software business, since software was the thing that I knew how to do. And mistakenly, now I can say in hindsight, I thought that the best odds for me to succeed was to do something that I was expert in, that I had been doing for 20 years almost, right? And in a domain that I knew a lot about. Sort of now I realized that it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, business is such a randomness-laden venture that sort of what I mean, I see people, I have friends now that have only started, for example, programming a year ago, and they're running hugely successful software businesses, making, $500,000 a year or more. And, others who have been doing programming for many years who are struggling. Like I did start a software product. It's doing almost, just breaking even. So I'm definitely not succeeding there. The things that I succeeded in were things that I would have never imagined myself. I could have never predicted to be doing back 2.5 years ago when I made this move, which I think is a very interesting insight in terms of how to approach, the self-employment journey, right? This sort of, you want to sort of be open to new opportunities and not really be sort of blinded and put your sort of just a rigid set of expectations about what you want to be doing, because otherwise you miss out a lot of, sometimes luck happens to find you, and if you're not looking for it, you just miss it.
Yeah, I think people are sometimes naive when they say, or maybe they just don't want to admit it, when they say that luck had nothing to do with it. This is all hard work. And I'm always like, there's always a little bit of luck. There's so many people out there that are like smart and work hard, but some, like you said, some don't make it. And there's always like a little bit of factor on luck, I think, involved in any success.
Oh, absolutely. Not. I would say. I would say the outcome is probably mostly determined by randomness, like by luck, whatever you want to call it, by things outside of your control. I think there are definitely some requirements. You need to work some amount. You need to, maybe build a good product. You need to do some basic things that you need to have something on the market. Those are necessary, obviously, but they're not enough. Right? I think for things to work out, there are things that are extremely hard to predict, that are outside of your control. And I think the only way to make them more predictable is to try many things, like to take a trial and error approach, a portfolio approach, I call it. Right? It's just to try many small bets. I like to call it that way. Which is, when you think about it, this is the same mentality that venture capitalists, movie studios, book publishers take, right? Where, a book publisher might publish, hundreds of books a year. Some of them, a small number, one or two might become bestsellers. The others would break even. Some of them would lose money, and so on and so forth. Like same things for venture capitalists investing in startups and movie studios, and so on and so forth. I think it's important to, at the individual level, do something similar with your project ideas, right? Is that obviously, as an individual, you can't start like 1,000 businesses or write 1,000 books or whatever. So you have to be even more rigorous with the types of bets that you make. You need to have an even higher filter than the startup investor who says, "Oh, this looks interesting. I'm going to invest $100,000 or whatever."
Yeah.
But nevertheless, I think you still want to take a portfolio approach, which is the same approach that those people take. And you have to find a group. Like for me, it happened to be like 3 or 4 things, right? That in my view had potentially low upside, but decent amounts of odds of working out. And, surprisingly, the things that worked out best, my biggest hits were things that I was probably the least optimistic about working out. So and pretty much the opposite as well. The thing I invested in most and the thing I was mostly optimistic, and the things that at the time had the biggest signs in terms of, interest from people and other things, turned out to be the ones that didn't work out well. So I think the best way to strategize in this sort of randomness-laden situation, again, is just to approach luck by having a large surface area, having lots of small, safe-to-fail bets, and then you sort of take it from there, right? It's otherwise, if you just, there's lots of survivorship bias when we hear stories about people who started with a single idea. They committed to it 100%. I mean, yes, I believe them, and I sort of definitely their efforts and their work mattered. But there's probably thousands of others for everyone who succeeded who did pretty much the same thing.
Yeah,
right. They focused on one thing, but a good product and a good worked hard and had lots of good things. But it's just fate and destiny just didn't meet to help you sort of make things work, right? And they went back to their full-time job or whatever, right? So
there's so many factors. Yeah, it's essentially it's not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah,
it's just
exactly.
It's you wanna try to, and I'm kind of doing something similar, and it seems like this is what's happening. And I don't know if it's maybe COVID has kind of put rocket fuel on it and accelerated, but it seems like, at least from what I've been seeing in the last couple of years, is COVID has kind of put rocket fuel or whatever other fuel you want to call it on the digitization of our economy, everything from the creator economy, direct to consumer stuff, fintech, crypto, everything is just accelerating. And we would have gotten there in, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, but it seems like we've gotten there like in a split second where everything is just changing so fast. It's hard to keep up. Like I think, oh, I know about something, and then there's some NFT stuff coming up, and then there's new thing coming up. It's just, have you noticed that as well, or am I maybe delusional?
No, absolutely. I mean, there's yes, definitely COVID, fueled many different things. But I think in general, like at least me personally, sort of, I don't really spend too much time and energy in trying to predict what's going to work, NFTs and things like that. I read about them just out of curiosity mostly.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, and just I always asking myself, is there an opportunity for me to do something? Sort of, I'm obviously willing to try things, but I don't believe, at least for the type of, the way I'm working, I don't think it's important to be good at predicting the future. Right? Yeah. What's important, I think, is to just be exposed to the opportunities. So I'd be able to have these chance encounters with things that could work out, and to have the capacity, both time and energy and sort of inspiration, to be able to try things when inspiration strikes, more than trying to figure out what's going to work or not. So I don't really look too much at trends as well. What I try to look at rather than trends is what is really working right now, right? Because I think, as I mentioned before, I think you have to be very rigorous with the things you try out. You don't really want to go for the 1 in 1,000 odds of success type of things, right? Yeah. The highly ambitious, highly speculative things. So I think one good filter is what are other people doing that is working out for them? Like this is, for example, one of the earliest successful things I had was writing a very short technical ebook about AWS, right? Something I knew quite a bit about. And I pretty much just marketed on Twitter. This made about $125,000 lifetime in about a year and a half. But it was, very inspiring, which led me to many other opportunities later. And I think what inspired me to try was I saw others, like people like me, right, doing something similar. It's basically trading some of their knowledge for money in the form of a PDF. Essentially, they did a brain dump of something they knew really, really well. They didn't really go the traditional book publishing approach, which has very different economics. Like many people I know who try that have a completely opposite experience. They spend 2 years working nights and weekends on their book, lots of tedious work, edits and things like that, only to make $10,000 or whatever, right? Yeah. Which many people swear they will never do it again, right? Or or things like that. Whereas with the self-published route, right? I mean, obviously you sell less copies, you reach less people. But I had seen before I had started a few other people like me, right, who managed to make a good enough sum of money to make the effort worth it, right? I mean, that's sort of what matters. So I tried that. No guarantees that I was going to make it work. I had very low expectations, but I time boxed it. I said I'm going to spend a month on this. Whatever happens, happens. And it works. But I think what's important again is that I tried this because I already noticed that it was working for other people like me. Yeah. Right? And I think that helps a lot. Because, when you're marketing things and pricing and things like that, there's lots of psychology involved. Like, why do we pay $5 for coffee at Starbucks and we're reluctant to buy an app that's
for 99 cents?
For 99 cents. Yeah. And this, I don't even try to explain them. This is just weird psychological anchors and all these, biases that we have in our lizard brain that sort of evolves fitness for like the prehistoric era. Right? So I think one way to compress all that weird psychological things is like, how are people already behaving? Like people today are already comfortable buying stuff online. They're buying from individual people. They're already comfortable, putting their credit cards on the internet, right? And many of them using social media. Like there's already creators selling on Twitter. So basically I said, let me try exactly the same thing. What the only thing I'm going to change is the material, right? And I think strategically that helped like increase the odds that this will work out. It removed lots of variables because, I also believe that when something doesn't work, you can never really tell why it didn't work. I mean, you can never tell precisely. Like, I don't really believe in these retrospectives to try to analyze because there's a million different things that could have happened. And you only need one thing for it to not work. It could just be the price, it could be the product, it could be the marketing, it could be, one small sub thing of those things. But when something works, of course, still you can't really say what are the things that are must or they were a must for it to work. But at least you can say that this thing can work, right? So it's not really validation, but it's something that tells you at least the spot is potentially viable, right?
Yeah.
Which is sort of, I think, helps you in sort of filtering out opportunities and figuring out what bets to make.
So you put out these info products and you used Gumroad. I'm curious why you decided to use, I guess, Gumroad as an outlet when there are, maybe not hundreds, but there's a lot of info services out there that sell e-courses, that sell ebooks, that sell, all this type of stuff.
Yeah, no, initially, pretty much the same answer. Initially, I chose Gumroad because I found myself buying from another creator, and I realized I was going Gumroad, and I used the same psychology. Like if it worked on me, like if I trusted Gumroad, chances are, and this is not a perfect heuristic. I mean, obviously, I'm not, I can't be generalized to everyone, but I think it's a very powerful one. Like, and this, I give the same answer where people ask me, how do you decide how to set your prices for your product, or what type of copy you use, or how many testimonials to rely on? And I pretty much always answer like, I try to analyze my own behavior when I'm the buyer, and I try to sort of replicate that, right, and sort of do something that would work on me. And again, like it's not perfect, but at least in the absence of other data, which initially we tend to not have, I think this is a very strong, sort of very, very good way of dealing with all these sort of ambiguous things. So yeah, initially Gumroad was like that. I found myself buying a PDF from another person, and they said, "Oh, this is interesting." I actually read the PDF. I found, wow, this was very useful. I felt like the $15 I spent were money well spent. I took a look at about what they were using. They were using Gumroad. I tried Gumroad. It was very easy to use. And there you go. That's one decision.
That's all you need.
Yeah.
Do you think you have to be a master? Because, let's say 10, 20 years ago, prior to the internet and the accessibility of everything online, if I were to sell a book, saying how to something, whatever it is, I would have to give credentials. I would have to say, oh, I have a PhD in this. Yeah. I have traveled the world for 40 years. I would have to have some sort of a background on this topic that I'm selling you the book on. Now, not so much, right? And how do you feel like that? How do people perceive that? Like, are people looking to get this information from quote unquote, air quotes, masters in the realm? Or are they good with people that are maybe just, I don't know, been doing it for a couple of years and this is their insight into the matter? No.
I think one of the most fascinating things I discovered is that in this self-publishing economy, right, where there isn't the gatekeeper of the publisher looking for credentials and authority and things like that, is that I think it created a market for people to learn from other almost beginners who just figured things out recently. And I'm noticing this from buyers. And I noticed this from myself. I started, for example, woodworking as a hobby recently, just a few months ago. And I found myself, I watched lots of YouTube, bought a few courses, and many of them were super daunting. Like these people had like shops, like, 5,000 square feet, and they spend like $100,000. And they do some nice furniture, but they feel inaccessible to me. Whereas the ones that I learned most from were people who had just, started woodworking a couple of years ago. They were, working from their garage, sharing their space with the car, and they were just working, with $1,000 worth of tools. And I
Because you
noticed
see
that people
yourself in them in a way, right? You're like, oh, I could do
basically,
this.
yes,
Like this is accessible.
exactly. I think we tend to prefer learning from people who are just a very small step above us, who just figure things out very recently. And I think in the info product economy, right, you can take this as an advantage. You learn something recently, and then you can ask yourself, what is the type of information or the type of sort of stuff that I wish I knew a year ago, right? And you can sort of make this your product, right? I think one of the most important things is that you speak from first-hand experience. You say the truth, right? You sort of you make it part of your marketing, right? I just did this, and here's everything that I learned. This basically my second info product, which was my bestseller, was basically much this. Right? It's a product, it's a short video course about how to build a Twitter audience, which is basically how I did it. Right? I started when I left Amazon. I had a little bit of a crisis pretty much immediately. Like the first week, I realized, wow, out here, nobody knows who I am.
Yeah.
Back at Amazon, I had a bit of a reputation inside the company. People knew my name. But outside, I had never written a blog post, no open source, nothing, right?
Yeah.
I was completely unknown. And it led me to building an audience, quote unquote. Like it's sort of basically, I prefer calling it getting myself known a little bit, right? Essentially. And again, like I'm not a marketing person. It's not something I'm not trained into these kinds of things. And I figured pretty much things by myself, trial and error. I did lots of things that were a waste of time, right? Or they didn't really work out. Long story short, sort of what happened when I released my first ebook, and on Twitter I started posting a little bit of some of the statistics about the sales. People were asking me, the most common question was like, how did you manage to build an audience that was interested in this book? Like, how did you do it? Like you started 6 months ago and you had no followers. How come you have 10,000 followers now?
Yeah.
And I kept answering the same questions sort of every day almost. And I realized like that there's more that I can say about this that doesn't fit into a tweet reply, essentially. And this became my second info product. I just prepared some slides, did a Zoom meeting with myself, pressed record, nothing fancy.
Yeah.
I just talked over, did a brain dump literally in real time, and set it up for $40. And this product made over $250,000 in a year and 3 months, essentially. That's quite incredible.
Amazing. Yeah.
Again, like I have a text with a friend of mine just the day before I released it. I said, like I'm not very optimistic that this is going to do better than my first product. Right? Like back then, I thought this was just another small bet.
Yeah.
I thought how many people
You thought you
are going to
peaked.
be. I thought like a technical product, which was my first one, like something like a programming how-to, was likely going to be more, would drive more word of mouth and things like that. Whereas, to my surprise, this turned out better by any measure. But again, like back to your question, again, I basically emphasized that 12 months before I knew nothing. Now I know something.
Yeah.
I'm a developer like you, like I was targeting to tech people. Like I'm an introvert. I'm not sort of trained in this kind of things. Here's everything I learned condensed into an hour and a half. And that was the value proposition, essentially, right? I mean, it's one of these types of product that it's the value is more inspirational rather than a programming book where you learn a skill, right? In a programming book, you read it, it's like an instruction manual, right? You learn some techniques.
Yeah.
This is more like, here's what I did, and maybe it will help you, inspire you to do something similar, maybe in a different way, because obviously, building an audience, it's not like you follow 3 steps and you do it, right? But it's sort of a different dynamic. So yeah, absolutely. I think I highly encourage people who feel that they know something interesting and something useful to people, even if they're quite new to it, to actually use their newness as an advantage and market on it.
That's very interesting, and I never thought of it that way. But while you were talking, I had 2 thoughts. One was, I'm blanking. What was it? Oh yeah. So one was it's almost like half the Twitter course. Did that drive Twitter audience, like, or Twitter followers, and then vice versa, the Twitter followers that also drives people to the course, right? So it's almost like these two things are working side by side in order to grow their one, the audience, and the other, the sales, right?
Yes. So I mean, to answer quickly, yes. I mean, success brings with it more success. So there's this weird thing, and I think this is again why randomness and luck have a big factor in the outcomes, right? Absolutely. Like I could, I was mentioning these numbers, 120K with the first product, 250 with the second one. I think there could have been some very, very small changes in the world that when I published them, that could have changed the outcome of the actual sales figure drastically. Like, for example, I got, maybe retweeted by a couple of influential people about products, and that mattered a lot. And if those didn't happen, probably I would have made half the amount or 1/4 the amount, or the other way around. Maybe I could have got an even bigger endorsement by somebody more important, and I could have made twice as much. Like, basically what I'm saying is, like,
that's
small
that luck factor.
The outside of our control can have huge impacts on how this goes, right? So, I forgot what was the original question.
Oh, no. It was just like like I said previously when you were talking. One was that. The other was that people are just as interested in the info products that you put out, but they're also interested in the process now, right? So, like, it's probably like equal parts this, equal parts that. Like, people are reaching out to you because you put out these great info products and they want to learn more. But they're also interested in the fact that you made so much money and made those successful, and thus reaching out to you to learn more about how you did that, which I don't know if that's almost a side effect of that, right? Like, that's probably not something that you envisioned.
So I didn't envision it initially, but I'm sort of intentionally doing it right now. Right? I'm sort of trying to pretty much everything interesting that I'm going through in my life. It almost became a habit. That I'm looking at my phone, looking at my computer, looking at my screen, and I see something that I think it might interest other people. My default is to take a snapshot and tweet about it, or write something. Same thing about my hobbies, essentially woodworking and sort of, building a custom home or other things. Like, I have no intention of monetizing those necessarily, right? It's just became part of my sort of my how I live. It became a habit. I think, when people follow you, initially, at least, they follow you for selfish reasons. So they want to learn from you, and they want to see something that could help them. Right. So I think when you're giving these sort of insights, again, that they're not common, right, or there's lots of demand for them, like, here's something that's working. People tend to be very curious, and they tend to follow because they expect more of it to happen, right? I had a very popular tweet just a couple of days ago that I just crossed $400,000 on Gumroad in total. It was like 6 a.m. in the morning. I was looking at my phone. I saw the round number $400 and $400K and $100, something like that. Took a screenshot again. I said, I just crossed 400K. I don't have all the answers, but ask me anything, and they'll give you my perspective. And I got like 150 questions, like all like in the matter of a couple of hours. And lots of people DM'd me, like, they found it super useful because they were asking me all sorts of things, like what things that we're discussing here. Like these are the type of things that make more people follow you. Like, I gained like another 1,000 Twitter followers from the tweets, right? Because people kept retweeting it, and it keeps driving things. So it's. Yeah, I mean, it's there's the saying, sell your sawdust, right? It's sort of, the side effects, the side products, and sort of the knowledge that I'm gaining, right? The thinking that I'm doing, the strategies that I'm doing myself to try to navigate sort of life as a self-employed person, dealing with uncertainty, dealing with variable income, and all these kinds of things. Right? I think about all these things all the time, right? And sometimes I just keep the thoughts to myself. So, when I get invited to a podcast, or I get questions on Twitter or in other places, it's sort of an opportunity to keep sharing all these things that I've been thinking about for the last year or two, right? And condense them.
Well, what I appreciate about you is there are a lot of people on the internet that share their wealth, but they do it in a very boasting manner,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like, oh, look at my car, look at my house, look at the chains and the gold and all that crap.
yeah,
You do it in a very transparent fashion where you're showing, hey, this is what can be done. And there are a few other people that do it in that
yeah,
manner. And that's what I appreciate. It's not to show that you made money. It's to show what is possible. And it's to show what can be achieved if you take these steps and these measures, which is
yes.
very, very different than the others.
No, I think that should be the intention, right? I think I like to say, like, so, what can seem boastful can seem inspiring to other people. And
Yeah.
again, going back to the fact that psychology is complex, many people tell me or dunk on me, telling me this is boastful and humble brag and whatever. So even though it looks like to you maybe that it's not like that, some people
Yeah.
see it.
I don't see it like that at all.
Yeah, it's again, like, it's just, you can't please everyone, right? And it doesn't work. I mean, the same message doesn't work with everyone. But again, like, I try to post the content that would work on me, and I make an assumption that people like me it would inspire them. I think when you're online, when you're on Twitter and in other places, you have to know it comes with the game that you get people who see it completely differently, right, and interpret it differently. So one nice thing about Twitter is that the people who follow you tend to have already filtered themselves out. Like, if they feel like you're boasting, it's easy to unfollow someone and they just go, right. So in general, my feedback is very positive in terms of, as we're saying, like, people tend to be curious. I mean, selfishly, in a good way, like, they just want to know more for themselves. Like, I want to do something like you're doing, what about this? What about that? Right. And sort of,
Twitter can be a great place if you follow the right people. Like, you can learn a lot. Now it's sometimes it's a little bit more too many of these threads, and that's become like all too common as well. But generally speaking, if you follow the right people, I really think you can learn a lot. Where do you think, or where have you noticed? Where have you noticed the best place to drive traffic has been for you? Back to the info products.
What worked for me was pretty much almost all Twitter, right? But
Twitter.
I would definitely not say that that's the only approach, right? I mean, I know many other creators who brought traffic to their info products to YouTube, to plain old search engine optimization, to just personal networks, right? I know people who had like no social media presence, but there's just in the industry they were well known, just word of mouth and things like that. So in my case, I mean, Twitter, as you were saying, like, something clicked with me with Twitter. I like the concision. It just felt very natural and for me to document what I was learning and share. And I just prefer writing rather than appearing on video. I prefer writing short form, actually, which is perfect for Twitter.
Yeah.
So Twitter was compatible with me, and it just worked. And maybe I'm leaving money on the table by not focusing on other things as well. But sort of in terms of, I have a little bit the luxury right now to do the things that I like rather than to, do other things that I have to do, against my will, sort of. So yes, I wouldn't necessarily translate this to mean that only Twitter works or Twitter is the best place, right? Probably not, actually, right? There might be other places that work better. But I think it's good to find to sort of find a medium that's really is compatible with how you like to express yourself.
Yeah, like if you were doing a course on how to take, Instagram pictures, Twitter wouldn't be the ideal place to promote it. It would be better, obviously, on Instagram or TikTok.
Yes, probably not. Although I wouldn't necessarily say it wouldn't work. Right? It might not be the best, but if you prefer Twitter, I would still probably give it a shot. Right? It might still work. But yes, I think probably the biggest factor is like, what do you feel most comfortable? What comes natural to you? Because I think it's important that it doesn't feel like a big deal. If you want to share something, you don't need to, like, video. I'm not great on video. Like, I'm not the kind of person who like takes selfies and talks to the video camera. Like, it still feels awkward to me.
Yeah.
But there are people who are pretty much the opposite, right? That they're great at it. And I think those people do extremely well on YouTube or Instagram or TikTok or other places. I just like to have a thought and I express it on Twitter. I find enjoyment sometimes and condensing what I want to say into 280 characters.
Yeah.
So it almost comes very, very naturally. Right now.
So I'm assuming most obviously like uh, writing an ebook or a PDF course or however it's called, that's work. But I'm assuming the majority of the work is after. Let's say I'm a creator right now, and I put out an e-course. I wrote the whole thing. I'm uploading it to Gumroad. Like, what are my next steps? What are some things that I should be doing now? Because and again, I've never used Gumroad. I don't know if you can promote it on the service itself. Maybe you can, but like outside of that, like what are some things that I should be doing?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty much all marketing, right? I mean, that's what's the main. So no, Gumroad. I mean, there is a Discover marketplace on Gumroad, but it's sort of, you shouldn't expect to have a lot of sales from there.
Yeah.
I think basically Gumroad is just a tool. Gumroad is just like Stripe, that it just helps you collect money and transfer them to your bank account, essentially, with some other tools like features to help you do discounts and bring on affiliates and things like that. So yeah, all the work is marketing, right? Essentially, and I think like marketing is one of those things that I sort of, again, like I started with no knowledge, no experience, no skills, I would say, but it's super important. It's one of those things that almost requires as much creativity as creating the product itself, or even more. Because I think if you do one of these products that's just a brain dump of something that you almost need no creativity, right? You're just dumping what you know.
Yeah.
I think marketing is, again, lots of trial and error. What works, what doesn't work, and you just need to get. It's simple, right? You have a funnel. You need to get people to know about the product. Some of them will be interested and they click. Some of them will be interested and they will check the preview. Some of them will like the preview and choose to buy.
Yeah.
Some of them choose to buy and not ask for a refund, and so on and so forth, right? At this point, right, in my for product life sort of cycle, I'm barely promoting anymore directly, right? I just have the link in my Twitter bio. I get 200,000 profile visits a month right now, just Twitter organically, and that translates to some clicks and some people check out what I'm doing. And there's still some word of mouth that's very hard to track, but I get people telling me, "Oh, somebody in my at my workplace recommended your course or your book." Right? So there's still some momentum going of word of mouth. That's going down, by the way. I mean, my last info product is almost a year old, and sort of the graph is going down at this point. That is that kind of business, where you get like spiky based on your launches and things like that. I think if you want to become a full-time info product creator, right, that this becomes your way of that your main income, probably most of your work is going to be figuring out how to get people to know about your products, marketing, right, and potentially creating more info products, right? Because that's part of the marketing. I had took a class in marketing. There was one of the 4 P's was products, right? You create more products, right? So you can work with pricing, promotion, and packaging, right? Those were the 4 P's. The 5th P is products, right? So sort of what I would say part of the work is being out there, looking for what people are interested to know more about that you happen to know something about, right? And then and this is where I think Twitter as well really helps me, right? I mean, I spend lots of time not tweeting, right, but just scrolling on Twitter, which many people think it's a waste of time. Yeah. But for me, actually, I feel like this is my, I call it my cocktail party equivalent, right? I hate parties, right? But I love the idea of parties. Like I love the idea that you go somewhere, you spend a couple of hours, and you bump with random people, and you have random conversations.
Yeah.
Twitter is my equivalent of that. I scroll around, I see people doing different things. Right, most of the days there's nothing interesting, but sometimes you bump into something interesting, and you start a conversation. It might inspire you to look more into it. It might inspire you to start talking about it yourself. And these are the things that lead to more ideas, maybe 6 months down the line, essentially, right? So to answer your question, yes, lots of marketing, and then I think it's just waiting and looking out, keeping your eyes open for inspiration, to meet with the opportunity to create new products, right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you think, I mean, the internet has kind of democratized many things for us, books, broadcasting, movies, essentially any content that we get now. I don't need someone else to authorize it. I can just publish it and I can keep the majority of the profits. Do you think we're going to see a complete shift at some point to more user generated? Or do you think they're always going to be, the two are always going to kind of coexist together?
No, probably they will. Right? I think the traditional sort of way of doing things still has value. Like if I want to maximize, if I have an idea and I want to maximize the reach, probably going to the traditional routes is probably like if I'm creating a movie and I want everyone in the world to see it, or almost everyone, probably the best route is to go to Hollywood and the usual process. Like same with a book. Yeah. If I have some great idea and I want sort of all as many people as possible to know about it, I'd rather contact one of the main publishers and try to get through that. I think what the sort of new way is helping is if I want to maximize sort of my ROI, essentially, right, of the asset that I have in my head, right, some knowledge that I have, some insight, some experience, and I want to maximize the revenue, the income that I get for that. I think you have higher expected value to make more money. Again, like there's going to be outliers. Like you're never going to become like the next J.K. Rowling and make $1 billion from self-publishing on Gumroad. Extremely unlikely, right? But obviously, the odds of making $1 billion from a fiction book are 1 in a billion, probably. Right? Whereas if you know something about a programming language that you can write 100 pages about, and you can make $100,000 from it, it's still not easy. It's still not a slam dunk 100% odds, obviously. But, you probably have 10% chance, 20% chance, depending on many other circumstances. If you have some audience already, if you have some credibility already and things like that. But it's democratizing, I think. Obviously, the internet had democratized the ability to say what you want, for everyone for a long time. I think the new thing is like people are able to make money from these things, right, which is becoming more easy, right, to actually exchange some of your knowledge for money. And this is happening like with newsletters, like we're seeing more common paid newsletters, like which until I think 4 or 5 years ago there were I had never heard about them. Same thing with sort of eBooks and video courses. I mean, these things might have existed 5 years ago, but these become more common both from the creator side as well as from the buyer side, which is very important, right? There's like the things are working, things people are used to them.
Yeah, a few years ago, it was everything for free. Now it's starting to change where we realize, if there's content I appreciate, I will actually pay for the podcast or for the newsletter or for the course, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, there's definitely a shift in consumer mentality on that, 100%.
One fascinating thing I'm realizing from my woodworking experience as a consumer, right, as like somebody who's learning, is that, for example, on YouTube, some YouTubers make some money from YouTube's program, but apparently it's not a lot of money, right? You need to be making millions of views. But many creators, for example, create a Patreon account, right, where they can get their fans to just spend $5 a month or even $1 a month. And sometimes the value proposition of this Patreon account is not that great. For example, they might tell you we'll release the videos like 2 days before we publish them on YouTube. It's not a huge deal. But it works, right? I mean, and it happened to me as well. Like, I mean, there were some creators that I learned so much from them that I felt really willing to give them $5 a month just for all the knowledge that they gave me. Like, it's like my way of paying them, right? Which is a very fascinating economy and dynamic, right? Where it's almost like tipping, but it's not even that, right? It's sort of another thing. So it's very interesting. That's sort of very, very interesting how many opportunities there are now to trade
there's
knowledge
never
for
been
money.
a better time to be a creator, I think. And yeah, I mean, look,
Yeah.
we could go on for another hour about this. I know you have to go, so I don't want to take up much more of your time. But before I let you go, are you happy? Like, is this how you envisioned it when you left?
Yeah, no. So I think this is the happiest I've been probably forever.
Oh
I
wow,
think
that's great.
I've so I don't know. Happiness is one of those things hard, obviously, to measure and define.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I'm managing to design my lifestyle around my own preferences. Obviously, there are still some things that I like to improve, but I feel in control of improving them more. And and this one of the fascinating things, like I'm making much less money than I was making 2.5 years ago, like less than half still, even though I'm quite successful, right? I have a profession that's less prestigious. It's very hard to describe what I do.
Yeah.
Right, one of the awkward things. Then, but I have 2 kids. I have a young family. It's great that I can take time off without asking people's permission. I can sort of spend my working days again, like working on whatever gives me energy and gives me inspiration.
Yeah.
And it's very important that I feel like I managed to find the trick to fend for myself, I call it, which is probably this could be another podcast
A whole new episode.
where where there's something that, again, super hard to describe, right? But I feel very confident now, despite my income being very variable and there's lots of uncertainty, that one way or another I'll manage to make ends meet and be able to sort of continue to survive without having to go back to a 9 to 5 job, right? Which, again, like that helped me a lot in my peace of mind, right? When that happened and I felt like I managed to figure this out. Which, by the way, this doesn't mean that my existing businesses and my existing products are going to continue to sustain me. I still have to find new ways, very likely, very soon.
Yeah.
But I feel very confident that I will find them, right? It's a very weird thing to describe, but
it's something every entrepreneur kind of goes through, right? It's those ebbs and flows. But I think being a master of your time is something that it's hard to put a price on that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Daniel, this was a lot of fun, man. I know you have a hard stop. I know we could have gone for another hour easy. I know. Just give some plugs. Where can people find you on Twitter? Where can they find on Gumroad? Anywhere else? Yeah.
No, the best place is Twitter at Vassallo, DVASSALLO. And I have links on my Twitter profile to everything else. But yeah, on Twitter, I'm super active. I'm there every day. Feel free to ping me, ask me questions, follow me, and so on and so forth.
Awesome, man. Well, guys, go follow Daniel. And Daniel, this was a lot of fun, man. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, I enjoyed it a lot.
All right, man. Take care, buddy.
Thank you.